So good morning from my side for the fourth Acer and ENSO-E long-term flow-based allocation workshop. Um, this time the workshop is a bit, let's say, shorter than in the previous occasions. We would like to update you on the progress of implementation of flow-based capacity calculation in the two flow-based regions, also the ongoing adoption of SAP and other allocation methodologies for the long term, and upcoming adoption of the harmonized allocation rules. Um, Talking about rules, a few rules for today's meeting. Please keep your microphone muted when not speaking. Raise your hand when you want to provide any oral comments. For the rest, use Slido. I will explain this later on. For you also to know that slides will be shared, no need to print screen or something, and the meeting has been recorded. Here are a few Slido instructions, how to connect to Slido. You have the direct link in MS Teams. You can also go through Slido link from this slide, and or direct link, or scan QR code as provided here. Okay. Then also more extended explanation. Do not use chat to pose a question. So use Slido and for either liking, providing questions, or replying or commenting to others' questions. Okay. Then regarding the agenda, before I hand over to our TSO and ENSO-E colleagues, and after these introductory remarks, we will have a short overview of current activities in Nordic and core regions regarding the implementation of the capacity calculation methodologies for the long term, followed by the QA session. After that, we have the allocation session as the main one, a roadmap of long-term flow-based allocation presented by ENSO-E, then update on the SAP or single allocation platform methodology, soon to be adopted, hopefully, will be provided by us. And maybe the main topic for today is harmonized allocation rules regarding its planning, auction timings, updates, and collaterals. We will also discuss a bit, let's say, reporting on the allocation simulations and upcoming allocation simulations, and allocated volumes and allocation results, as there was also a big interest from the market participant side in previous emails. So this will be followed by a QA session, and at the end we will have a wrap up. So with the plan to finish at 10:30. That would be introduction from Acer's side. I would now hand over to our TSO and ENSO-E colleagues, and Jim Wilson to provide a couple of words.
Thank you, Soren, and welcome everyone to this joint workshop that we have between ENSO-E and Acer on the long-term flow-based allocation. As Soren presented earlier, some of the tasks or some of the presentations today will be on some of the methodologies that has been updated just to accommodate the long-term flow-based allocation, so the SAP and the HAR. Along those two methodologies, we as TSOs have also updated two other methodologies, but those are just inter-TSO methodologies that doesn't really affect the market participants. But as Soren said, I mean, the project for long-term flow base are going quite good as term of implementation timeline. We will also see a little bit later, which Harald Heider from APG will present. We are on good track to reach some of the milestones in 2024 that we aim for. But if we look at the next point on the agenda is the update from the Nordic colleagues, and for that I'll bring the word or give the word to my Norwegian colleague Trond, who is in charge of that agenda point. Are you there, Trond?
Yeah, yeah, my microphone was muted for a while.
Okay, perfect.
Sorry about that. I can also...
Good to have you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you too. Yeah, you can go to the first slide, the next slide. I will be quite brief. There's not that much to say actually. But first of all, in the Nordics today, as most of you know, there are transmission rights only on a few borders, and those are in Denmark. So there are some transmission rights between DK1 and DK2. And then there are transmission rights from DK1 to Germany and DK2 to Germany as well. So those are all the LTRs that are there currently. So unless there are transmission rights on several borders in the Nordics, the long-term CCM is basically a long-term capacity forecast. However, there is a decision coming up in Norway, at least later this year, on the hedging opportunities in the Norwegian markets. So we don't know the outcome of that discussion. That's up to the regulators to decide. So things can change going forward. With that said, the long-term capacity calculation methodology is linked to the timeline of the day-ahead intraday capacity calculation methodology. And the new capacity calculation methodology for the Nordics are currently set to have a go live in Q1 2024. And this is much later than we anticipated and planned for. And there is a reason for that. And the reason is that we had some problems with doing the market simulations during the last half year. So we were not able to do any market simulations since late May, early June. It has recently been restarted. So we are now in the external parallel run again, with the market results coming on a weekly basis. So our plan is to go live in Q1 2024 with a flow-based market coupling in the Nordics. And then the link towards the long-term CCM is that this long-term CCM will go live 12 months after the day-ahead intraday CCM. So that means that our current plan is to have up and running a long-term capacity calculation methodology in Q1 2025. And initially, this is a flow-based capacity calculation. Unless if the flow-based allocation mechanism is not in place by that time, then we have an intermediate solution which is based on ATC extraction. We don't anticipate that to be go live anyway, because hopefully the flow-based solution is there when we go live with our long-term CCM. So that's basically where we are now. We have a delay due to what has happened in the day-ahead external parallel run.
Thank you, Trond. I currently don't see any questions for the Nordic long-term CCM, so thank you. And I'll leave the word for Sarah from 50 Hertz for the core LT CCM update. Maybe there is a question actually on the Nordic. Will the Nordic do long-term flow-based allocation differently when Nordic flow-based goes live?
The Nordic flow-based, when we go live, and if then at that point in time the the allocation mechanism is a flow-based mechanism, then we will have a flow-based capacity calculation and allocation in the Nordics as well, at least as far to my knowledge. And there are some slight differences between what we do in the Nordic and what is happening in core in terms of flow-based. Those are minor differences like advanced hybrid coupling, the way we handle different mitigation efforts like remedial actions and so on and so forth. But in terms of functionality, it should be very similar, more or less the same.
Thank you, Trond. And once again, just a reminder, post a question in the Slido function. It's up in the upper corner, upper bar, and it's a lot easier to follow if we post there. Then I'll leave the floor to Sarah. You should be able to unmute yourself now.
Yes, it worked. Thank you.
Great. Hi.
Hello.
Welcome.
It's also a short update from us from our planning, where we are right now on the long-term capacity calculation for core. As you can see in the year 2022, we went through the final approval process for our methodology. We had the final NRA approval in Q4 by November. Then we went through finalized the functional and non-functional requirements, which are the basis for our tool development. We also finalized the RFP process for selecting a vendor for developing the long-term capacity calculation tool. And we started some experimentations with the prototype that we had for long-term and worked with the market working group for allocation simulations. And today, where we are now is that we are finalizing, well, we started development and implementation with the vendor, and there are some final questions on the requirements that we have to go through also for finalizing the design phase. But that's where we are today. And what we plan also this year on the TSO side is to develop the tools for the input provision and also for validation. So that's what you see, the local readiness. We will plan to do this at local level until the end of this year. And the RSCs will go through the tool adaptation also for long-term capacity calculation. And what you can see, considering testing, by the middle of the year, we will go into some testing that will prepare us for the parallel run that we plan right now on the 2024. So at the end of the slide, you can see we have some external dependencies. We have the whole CGMS decision that has been discussed in a separate task force. And we have therefore the link to the ahead and intraday capacity calculation tools once they switch to CGMS. And the same goes for the OPC migration. So this is what our year looks like. I don't know if there are any questions on the planning that you see here. Otherwise, we'll hopefully go live in November, or we plan to go live in November next year.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. There are no questions in the Slido or the chat, actually, so leave it a few seconds for the ones who are willing to comment or question. Nothing really coming in, Sarah, so I think you did a great job of presenting everything. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
And the roadmap for the long-term flow-based allocation will be presented by my dear colleague Harald Heider from APG. See you're live, Harald, so I'll leave the floor to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Jim. Good morning to everyone. We have just now heard the updates related to the capacity calculation processes. The next thing I would like to explain you and show you again is the roadmap related to the long-term allocation process. Here you can see that the first steps we did, and we had a very fully packed year in 2023 with updating methodologies where the CID and the FCA methodologies we submitted for approval to Acer in October. And these two methodologies are currently still at Acer to become approval. I have to say that these for those two methodologies, more or less, we made them fit to consider long-term flow-based, and the changes for market participants, which are relevant for market participants, are probably minor until or even nothing, because these are more or less methodologies which are relevant for TSOs to share and compensate long-term congestion income. So the direct impact on market participants is very low, and the only relevant information, more or less, is that in the compensation mechanism for long-term rights, there will be no change for market participants, which means long-term rights are also in the future compensated by the market spread. For the next two mechanisms, the HAR and the SAP, the HAR is in the biannual process. And for those two, for the HAR and for the SAP, we will have dedicated slides and dedicated explanation. Therefore, I only explain this very short here. HAR, we have a bit more to update considering long-term flow-based, and this is in progress. And the SAP methodology we also submitted in October to Acer, and here Acer will present what is now the final or the actual status. Here there is significant change in the methodology, because as this methodology was made first time, the focus was to implement a single allocation platform, which is CHAO, and this was the focus of the original drafting of this methodology, and now the focus is really to explain the allocation mechanism, to explain the processes, and to include those things also in the SAP methodology, and Acer will explain what shall be updated here. What in parallel to the development of all these methodologies, we started together with CHAO the process of requirement drafting and for implementation, and this is now in a relatively good state, I would say. Of course, there are some small open points, and could not be considered in the currently drafting and IT requirements, which were prepared for IT provider, for future IT providers, but this will be done also very soon. And then the next step is technical development. So the main focus, starting with Q2 2023, will be the development phase, mainly on CHAO side. And in parallel, starting, we currently have planned, and from middle of Q4 2023 that we have TSO and Chow testing and simulation based on the tools they are developed so far. Then probably the most important information for market participants that we plan that on beginning on or middle of Q2 2024 that we start a parallel run. There is a simulation tool in preparation by Chow, which shall be used for and available for market participants that we can indeed test together with market participants, with Chow, with TSOs, with long-term capacity calculation experts, the tools prepared so far for the go live of long-term flow-based, which is still planned, and I hope or I think we are good in track that we can go live with the beginning of 2025. So you see this exact timings to be discussed, especially for the testing phases. This is one of the focus of our and will be presented probably in one of the next workshops. How this testing phase will be in detail structured. This is one of the next things we have to do. But of course, it can be finalized and done if we have more or finalized also the development phase. This is so far what is the current time plan and update for the allocation process. Are there any kind of questions?
There are questions, Harald, but we will take them in the dedicated Q&A after. So
Okay.
I'm supposed to move forward, and then we'll have a Q&A.
Yeah. Then I think I give the floor to colleagues from Aether, to Soran, explaining the current status of the sub-methodology.
Thank you, Harald. Thank you also for the introduction and the timing for this process. I will not repeat in many details that we received end of September the 3 methodologies to be, let's say, approved by Acer. The most important here in this audience is single allocation platform methodology. With, as you said, the main amendments this time were to enable long-term flow-based allocation, but since this was the first time for Acer to have the SAP methodology in its hands, we make sure that to revise the whole methodology in cooperation with all TSOs and arrays. To remind that we had a public workshop on 17th of November last year, and we expect the adoption by the Board of Regulators of this methodology very soon, end of February 2023, hoping there will be no issues with that. Main changes or main amendments in the methodology, though we mainly agreed with TSO's proposal, just we refined a few aspects over there. We jointly clarified the application of the SAP methodology along with all the others for all that's applicable for all TSOs except those which are exempted based on the FCA article 30.7 and the ones not commercializing the transmission capacity on both day ahead and long-term market. Important addition or clarification was made for allowing for evolved flow-based, so-called evolved flow-based approach at both internal HVDCs, such as Allegro Cable, Belgium, Germany, and on external HVDCs, also extending to radial non-meshed AC borders. Calling this evolved flow base should not confuse you. This is similar to the application of advanced hybrid coupling or AHC on day ahead level. Just we didn't want to call it advanced hybrid coupling because it's not coupling. So we call it generally evolved flow based, whether internal to the flow based region, such as Allegro, or on the borders of flow based regions towards either NTC regions or in between the two flow based regions for the cables between core and the Nordics. Extending to radial non-meshed AC borders practically means so far it means a border between Denmark 1 and Germany, which we consider as non-meshed, as proven that principles of evolved flow base can be applied over there similarly as there is a HVDC link. Regarding the implementation, it should be ready. It has to be ready for the flow-based yearly auctions for 2025. That means we expect this application in somewhere November 2024. Also, we provided detailed proposal on stepwise implementation of evolved flow-based approach. Some of these steps with evolved flow-based, such as internal application, will be done in the first step together with yearly auction 2025. Others, this external evolved flow-based will be applied afterwards in a defined sequence. Regarding the long-term allocation algorithm, we aligned mathematical representation of CNTC-based and flow-based allocation approaches in the document. Then currently, the SAP supports PTRs and FTR options, while we recognize together with TSOs that application of FTR obligation requires amending of the SAP and at least SAP and HAR. So currently there is no application or intention of application of FTR obligations. Once they come online, these documents needs to be amended. Regarding monitoring, reporting, and transparency, also important for market participants, we provided the obligation for yearly monitoring report to assess the implementation progress, then a long-term cross-zonal capacity allocation, including allocated volumes per bidding zone border direction, performance of the algorithm, incidence of insufficient collaterals, and also the publication of a non-confidential version of the SAP cooperation agreement. And the last slide here, I think, presented this also on the public workshop. These are a few details from the long-term flow-based allocation algorithm. No changes in this respect. The objective is to maximize the economic surplus, sum of bids, bid prices times accepted bid volumes. There were some extensions with the constraints where the flow at each CNEC or group of CNECs as needed for the Nordic flow based, also GNEC or group of CNECs, also accepted bid volumes times, let's say, positive PTDF needs to be lower than the RAM values. Then total allocated capacity per bidding zone border should be lower than the so-called external constraint. That's the common name that we provided for a border-wise constraint if and where defined. If it's defined for the whole perimeter of a bidding zone, then it becomes export-import limit. And the clearing prices per border is sum of dual values times PTDFs per all CNECs, and the congestion revenue is sum of clearing prices times accepted bid volumes per all borders. So we haven't changed these aspects of the allocation algorithm. So soon we expect to provide the news regarding the application of or adoption of the SAP methodology. That's it. I would now hand back to NCE colleagues for the harmonized allocation rules, and if there are questions, we can reply to them in the QA session.
Maybe Zoran, I know that we have a Q&A session planned at the end, but we have a lot of questions that piled up. Some of them are general, so I believe that for the general understanding, it might be good to answer some of them already now. So sorry for that.
Okay.
But, so we have some general remarks from Eurelectric and EFET. For that, I would propose to keep them for the end and give them the floor. But we have some high-level questions, and I will start from the more high-level to the more detailed questions. And here I would like to attribute this one to our TSO colleagues. A question from Mikko Peltonen, asking if it's possible to wrap up on the aim of long-term flow-based allocation, asking if the output is going to be similar factors as in day ahead, but with future power systems, or if we are going to get tradable FTRs.
I'll answer. The outcome will be that there will be tradable FTRs as we are used to today. The only change will be how these FTRs are allocated in a single auction. But other than that, there will be tradable FTRs as we know them of today.
Thank you, Jim. Then another high-level question from Martin. Is long-term flow-based another way of including LTA?
And LTA long-term?
I believe it's a reference to the LTA allocation or LTA inclusion in the day-ahead market. And to that, I would say that it is not the another way. It is another way to calculate and allocate capacity in the long term. This will have impact on the way the LTA is represented in the ahead, but that's not the main intention, I would say. But that would be my proposed answer. Then another question from Hélène, here more detailed, and I would propose to give it to Harald because it's linked to one of the slide he presented. Could you clarify what will be tested and simulated in the external parallel runs?
Yes, in the external parallel run, we plan to have more or less to make available a full tool for market participants that and we will offer long-term flow-based domains and run examples for yearly and monthly auctions. And market participants would have the possibility to give bids to these auctions and see what will happen or how is the behavior of the system, how is to get a feeling what kind of bid level is needed, because currently now we have not a direct competition on European market between all biddings on borders. We have only in the past NTC allocation, and there was no direct competition between all European borders. And in flow-based this will be new, and especially to give the market participants the possibility to become aware of this competition process. We will offer this this tool also to learn how to interpret the published data with which min-max capacities is available to see how it could be understood, how much capacity is available also for the individual bidding some directions, and this is what we plan to do. So it is the only restriction will be, as I know so far, is that the number of bids which can be given per bidding zone border is restricted.
I see that Hélène wants to react to that. Hélène, I believe you can unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the explanation. So I understand this external parallel run will be like simulating the real auction. So
Yes.
I understand it's very important that a lot of market participants participate And will the restrictions on collateral be included in that, so that we can test the impact of the collateral limitations?
I would assume yes, but this is a question which is probably more to be asked by Zhao, maybe not in the first stage of this external parallel run, but probably in...
I guess we will talk about this issue in a moment, but suppose that no solution is found, we consider extremely important to also simulate that, because if there is no solution for this problem, it means that you will have an auction with only part of the bits that would normally be there. So that's also another reason for which we believe that this auction doesn't make any sense. Confirm my general comments, but so in that case, we consider it extremely important to show what the real impact is, to see if there is indeed or not a problem. So maybe if you can just take this point for further discussions with Zhao colleagues, and hopefully a solution is found for that problem.
At least I can assure to you that TSOs are aware of this problematic of collaterals. We have at the end of today's call a dedicated point to discuss this and come up with first proposals how to probably reduce the collaterals needed from market participants, and Acer will present a few first options, and we would like to discuss this with you. And then if we have a solution, then Zhao is able to ask their IT provider how long it took to implement this, because it's dependent on the selected solution, how easy it is for Zhao to be implemented.
Okay, perfect.
This is the reason why I cannot exactly say to you it will be definitely implemented in the beginning. However, as I understood, there will be in the testing phase, at least as my assumption is, that there will be some tests simulating yearly and monthly auctions, and some tests simulating the functionality of the tools.
Okay.
So these are two separated steps. One is checking the tools if everything is running proper. So this can be done on a relatively frequent way. And a second approach is to simulate indeed yearly auction, and based on the results of the yearly auction, the TSOs calculate the capacity for monthly auction, and this we will do in the parallel run.
Thank you for the feedback.
Thank you, Harald. Thank you, Hélène. I would propose now to come back to the initial planning, and so to continue with the zoom on the harmonized allocation rules, where we have a few subtopics that are presented. And for the first one, I will give the floor to Jim for the planning, and then we'll continue and have a longer Q&A session at the end, where we will address the general concerns on the long-term flow-based allocation.
Thank you, Tomek. So harmonized allocation rule is, or the update of harmonized allocation rules is approaching sort of the last phase. Right now it's with internal approval with Ensui and Zhao, but just bringing us back to 2022, end of 2022, we ran the public consultation with the market participants as the prime receiver of that. We got some feedback in terms of the changes that we imposed. We also had a shadow opinion where Acer also came with their feedback on the changes. All those changes have been considered, and most of them have been incorporated in the final version that we will submit by latest 1st of March 2023. And harmonized allocation rules just are the rules setting all the rules for how the long-term transmission rights are auctioned, priced, and how they are given to the market participants. Just to put some words on that as well. As I said, we will submit it by 1st of March 2023, and then Acer will have 6 months to review it and hopefully approve the methodology that we have sent in. And this is, of course, that we can have the updated harmonized allocation rules approved by when the first auction takes place for the long-term flow-based allocation, which we expect now, as Harald presented earlier, to be the yearly auction for year 2025. So by 2024, end of November, we expect the harmonized allocation rules to be implemented and up and running. Actually, the next topic, I give the floor once again to my dear colleague, Harald Heider.
Thank you again. Yes, now we come to a point we have also discussed in the past between or under TSOs extremely long. It is how auction timings could be worked in the future, considering flow-based allocations. And can we go to the next slide, please? The background is that especially on long-term flow-based allocation, we have the long-term flow-based calculation process will take it, or we have to consider 5 days for this long-term flow-based calculation process. And we can, of course, only start with the monthly calculation, which takes again 5 days for the monthly auctions of January, after we have successfully finished the yearly process. And I say calculation time is one of the limiting factors for the timetable and for the other processes on the one hand, and on the other hand, that TSO experts and capacity calculation entities can start with this with the long-term flow-based calculation process for the yearly. We have to know all the details with reduction periods, with work on lines and coordinate this between TSOs. And this would mean that also and this information is usually only available on a relatively late state in the year for the following year. And this is also one restriction when we can even start with the calculation of the long-term flow-based process. And therefore, we had a lot of challenges and we had to make some assumptions in the future for implementation of flow-based allocation. In principle, there will be no change because we have still yearly auctions. If the yearly auctions are not successful, we have to offer a fallback solution for the first run of yearly auction. Then, hope after that, we have yearly results, and then we can start with the calculation of the monthly process. And then we have the monthly auction, and also for the monthly auction, we need sufficient time for a fallback if something in the monthly auction goes wrong. This has a consequence that, as I already said, calculation time for long-term flow-based domains need at least 5 days. And therefore, the yearly auctions has to be shortened for long-term flow-based from 5 days to 3.5 days from gate opening to gate closer for the yearly auctions. And for the monthly auctions, we have to reduce this time from 2 days to 1.5 days. The return is still possible, of course, that you can return capacity you have awarded in the yearly process to the monthly. And it is important to say that returns, they were made from the yearly process to the monthly, and we have to rerun the yearly process. Then this return will be still valid for the rerun of the auction, and and the return possibility is 1.5 days for the second auction. And another thing we have to shorten a bit is the so-called dispute period of the auctions, which is currently 2 days. So for the yearly auctions, we will shorten this to 1 day. And this is a period where market participants can check their results based on their bids. And if there are some problems, they can state this to Chao, and Chao will check this. And after the this dispute period, there is a dispute evaluation, and based on the result of the dispute evaluation, it has to be decided if this dispute is correct or not. If it is correct, then we have indeed to rerun the auction and have to use the fallback option. Or if this dispute or none of these disputes is valid, then we can publish with a bit of delay the results of the original auction. And of course, if we have some problems, then Chao or IT providers need some time to fix these problems we have found, and this is all considered in our auction timings. Maybe we can go to the next slide. Here you will see all the processes, beginning with the original yearly auction with the dispute period, which is now reduced from 2 days to 1 day. The dispute evaluation, which is the time Chao has to have a look if there are disputes, if these disputes are correct, and then an IT buffer to fix any problems if they found, and then to rerun the yearly auction. Then this is the latest time, this is in this slide, the 6th of December, where we shall have final yearly auction results. This would mean that on the 9th of December, we probably, or we can start in the latest to calculate the flow-based domain for the yearly for the monthly process. Here, as I already said, we need 5 days. And then again, there is the auction process, the original auction, which is now reduced from 2 days gate open to 1.5 day. Then there is still evaluation period, dispute period. And yes, what I did not say is that the second, if we indeed need a fallback for the monthly or for the yearly, then it is not possible to dispute the second, the fallback auction, assuming that here we have correct results. This is something we have simply to do to enable that we can fill in all those tasks within end of December, because you also see as it is planned that we have final results more or less in middle of week 51, if everything goes correct with the monthly auction. If not, then we have here the dispute, and we have to fix this close before Christmas. And if indeed we need a fallback of the monthly auction, which means we have to rerun the monthly auction, we can do this only after Christmas. But of course, we hope that this is not the case. Of course, the plan is that original auctions are run smoothly, and we do not need this kind of fallback procedures, but you can never assure by 100% that this is not needed. And this is the background why we had, especially for the yearly auction and for the first auctions for January 2025, this extremely packed calendar. For the further monthly auctions, we keep more or less the timings as we had in the past. because there we have only, I say, the monthly auctions month by month, and there the time pressure is not that high as it is in December, where we have to perform yearly auctions and monthly auctions. This is so far to the auction calendar as we have planned, and especially on this graph or this slide, you will see how packed the calendar is. And this is also the background why we simply have to reduce some timings. And this will also be written down and has be considered in the drafting of the HAR. This is so far to the auction calendar. And so the next point will be then the collaterals. We already had a short question to that collaterals, and the colleagues from ACER will again bring more details to that topic, because we had together with ACER very intensive discussions how we can assist here market participants to reduce the needed collaterals on the one hand, and on the other hand to assure for TSOs that the risk for TSOs losing money is not too high and is not becoming more than we can take over from TSO side. This is the pro and the con of collaterals in general, and I would give now the floor to Martin.
Yes, thanks, Harald. Thanks for the introduction as well. Yeah, I will provide you an update on JAO collaterals, maybe just to remind you a little bit about the background. So, I mean, we will have, as you know, the long-term flow-based allocation, and this will require the LTTRs of all bidding supporters in a flow-based CCR to be allocated in a single auction. So this is different compared to the current setup, where you have the NTC based allocation and you use sequential auctions. And therefore, in the flow-based, long-term flow-based allocation, it would likely require more collaterals from market participants at the time of the auction, when you assess the available collaterals against the bids provided by market participants. Yeah, and if market participants are in general not able to provide sufficient collaterals to cover for their bids will be rejected. I mean, this is the same case right now, but it will be much more significant, as we said already, in case of long-term flow-based, when all of the bidding supporters are allocated or are auctioned at once. Yeah, for this also during summer 2022, so last summer, JAO consulted on the possible solution for bid prioritization for JAO collaterals. So for market participants to give kind of some rating to bid, which should be rejected first in case of insufficient collaterals during this auction phase. But of course, also as identified previously, like the deletion of these bids in the order books of the auction could also have a negative, wider effect. I mean, also for the regarding the impact on the economic surplus generated by auctioning LTTRs. So this is all things we take very seriously, and we discussed a lot as well. Maybe also to add something to be made clear, we are talking here about the collateral requirement for the auction phase. So after the clearing of the LTTR auctions, the collateral requirements compared to now will remain unchanged. So there is no change compared to the NTC allocation with border by border approach, with the sequential auction, or the flow-based all borders at once. Once you're done with the auction, the collaterals will be unchanged pretty much. So therefore, the discussion really focuses on the collateral requirements for the auctioning phase. Yeah, just to quickly remind you also of the general objectives we should consider when thinking about changing or about having the collateral requirements. I mean, first of all, we should avoid financial losses for TSOs and also put a reasonable financial burden on stakeholders. So we don't want to overburden and have negative effects as just mentioned before. But also I think it's important that we do prevent non-payment and punish non-payment and prevent gaming as well. So yeah, this is just a general objectives we should consider when thinking about possible solution. And Acer and NRAs and TSOs we discussed several options which could reduce the collateral requirements for market participants in this auction phase in long-term flow-based allocation. And I will just shortly give you a little bit an overview of the most relevant ones we discussed, and then also further explain what we then further considered on those. So yeah, I have two options here. So one is quite simple regarding the idea. It's just to have a percentage of today's collateral requirements. So just use it or reduce it based on a percentage. So basically 100% means exactly the same as today's. 0% means no collateral requirements at all. But of course, it's very difficult to set this kind of percentage where and I mean, it also requires quite some assessment. And then also based on this assessment, it's difficult to assess, but it's also difficult to agree then, of course, on what is actually the right percentage to use. So this is a huge challenge. And also then there is another point, since we are now talking only about the auction kind of part of collaterals, and then you have the unchanged collaterals. Like if you reduce it to some level and keep the normal collateral requirements, then after clearing of the auction, you might end up with lower kind of collateral requirements in the auction phase than after the clearing, and there might be this gap, which also is something to consider. I will come to this also later at another option. So yeah, this is one option we thought about. Then also another very different kind of option is maybe to think about some kind of different system, so more socialized pot for collaterals, which could be fueled by fees from market participants. So it's no individual collaterals by market participants in this case at all. I mean, but the challenges here also quite complex to set this up and to set up also the details. There's several remaining open questions, also quite maybe some risks related to these options. I mean, it would need quite a lot of further work, and questionable if this is the way to go. Also, I mean, it's in theory it could also be combined with other options, but yeah, so far this is quite a complex approach to it as well, and a very different one. And very important, of course, also in this option that we still remain some kind of individual responsibility or consequences in case of non-payment, since it's like this kind of concept by default is there is not much individual, like there is no individual collateral. So, but we should still prevent non-payment and have and prevent gaming, etc. So this is also some very important point for this option if we would follow up. Then we have two more options which we considered relevant in our discussion. So one is the concept of using so to have several iterations of the flow-based allocation auctions, and only have bid rejection after start looking at bid rejection after the first iteration. So then the collateral requirements in this auction phase would not be based on the bid prices of the auction, like of the market participants, but rather subject to the auction results. So also much closer to what will be the collateral requirements after the auction, after the clearing of the auction. However, this might need quite a lot of iterations as well to find the right and the process is quite complex, especially with the flow-based pricing, with flow-based allocation, etc. So this would be very challenging. We would still need to look in if this would even be feasible. So also quite a challenging approach. Okay, and then we have the last option I will present, and I will further would like to discuss with you. So the concept here is to have a maximum price level for the collateral requirement. So it's in the end you have a mix between the market participants' bid price and a max price cap for the consideration of collateral. So of course, market participants can still provide any bids they want to the auction for LTTR on the bidding zone border. But then for considering the collateral requirements, we will take the minimum between the bid price and this kind of cap we will have to define somehow for determining the required collaterals in the auction. Also here, of course, I mean, we don't know, of course, when setting the cap, we don't know exactly what will be the outcome of the auction. So if we set the cap too low, for example, and we have a higher auction outcome, there is still kind of this gap regarding collateral requirements in the auction phase and after the auction. And it's there is a difficulty on how to consider this gap and how to deal with this to make market participants with insufficient collaterals at the time come up with the remaining collaterals after the auction, and how to deal with this is a little bit of a challenge for sure. Also, I mean, maybe something to have in mind that we don't want to have some kind of incentivize some gaming behavior with such a setup. So this is very important in case we want to follow up with this option. Also, of course, how to set the cap is a big challenge, of course, of this option. So I mean, we can, in theory, can have a fixed cap for all bidding zones. I mean, maybe better to have some more of a dynamic cap, like, I don't know, looking into either historic results or looking at the current spreads on the forward market plus some markup or something like this. But of course, there we would need to have a methodology and quite some discussion on how to set the cap, which in the end would make the big difference, I guess, whether you what kind of collateral requirements there would need to be. Yeah, so this was short overview on the options we had or we discussed. Now we're quite close to the submission of the HAR methodology. So we still need to look further into it. However, the option with the cap, so the last one I just described you, currently seems the most promising option, also regarding feasibility. And TSOs and JAO are currently assessing the technical feasibility of implementing this option. So, however, I will, and in any case, we also thought like this presented idea of bid prioritization, which was kind of rejected to some extent by market participants, since it doesn't fully address the issue. I think it might still be relevant as kind of some option to complement some new option as well. So we can also kind of combine or add bid prioritization possibilities for market participants to the option, but of course only if market participants do see any value in it. I mean, if we say there is no value in having bid prioritization in any approach, why should we invest to implement such an option, let's say? But yeah. So yeah, altogether, I think it's still ongoing, the assessment on how can we deal with the collaterals, collateral requirements, and what to consider, how can we improve it. And Acer NRAs, JAO, and TSOs are further assessing these issues and details and potential drawbacks also of this option with the cap as well, and further possibility. We are also thinking about further possibilities to improve the requirements related to processes considering the JAO collaterals. One idea also is maybe in general, if we can lower general daily collateral requirements for market participants. It could also be an idea to go in this direction if we manage to strengthen the requirements in some other aspects where it can be relevant. So this is just some thoughts maybe, and where we also ask market participants if they see some room to improve any kind of provisions related, or also to strengthen at some parts, like provisions for collateral requirements, where you would see it would make sense to have some stricter provisions on some aspects, while maybe losing the kind of provisions or requirements on in general in other parts. I think it would also be quite valuable to hear your suggestions or your views in what you see as constructive or efficient changes to have a much more overall efficient setup of the approach towards collaterals as well. So we are very open to hear your ideas as well, and you're very welcome to share this with us in over any channels. So you can just contact us on this as well. Coming to the next steps as presented already, we have so we will have the HAR submission by TSOs on 1st of March 2023, so basically in more or less 2 weeks from now, and these will come without, as far as we know, like this will come without any kind of specific changes to the collateral requirements in the proposal as such, but there will be probably something more in the explanatory note to make aware of this, and then maybe we have to consider this in the ACER decision process as well. So so unfortunately we don't have this in the proposal yet, also because new options under collaterals have been identified rather late in this HAR review process. So as you know, they were also not yet available in the public consultation process by TSOs. So we didn't had a lot of discussions on this yet. This didn't allow us to have a lot of discussion yet, but at least we do look into it, and we also hope to have maybe some feedback now and also further down the process. Then of course, I mean, TSOs and ACER, we will of course want to further engage with market participants regarding these topics, and then once we have the decision process ongoing, which should start rather soon, we also intend to have a public consultation on this in our decision process, also going into this direction, and also have a public workshop in the for the HAR decision in general. And so we will continue looking into this. Regarding the timings of the public consultation and the workshop, it's we didn't start the decision process yet, so it's a little bit difficult to say, but maybe around April would be a very rough first guess from my side. But you will hear from us on this rather soon as well, when we get the submission. I don't know if Jim, you would like to comment on anything regarding the further process, or also some details of the option discussed, or some considerations here.
Thank you, Martin. I think you did a great job presenting a very tough topic. I mean, we know that it will impact market participants quite substantially. Another aspect of this, of course, is also that it will impact JAO and their IT system quite substantially. Also, taking in mind that we do have the long-term flow-based allocation, just a general allocation algorithm and the IT system around that also need to be implemented. So there is a large impact assessment ongoing now within JAO to actually address the options that are on the table now. And as Martin also said, I mean, if there are any other possible options out there along the market participants on how to cope with this issue, and also still stick with the 4 principles that Martin set out earlier. I mean, we're happy to interact in those dialogues with you on how to solve this issue. But I also see there is a question in terms of the quantitative assessment. Right now, there hasn't been a quantitative assessment. There is, however, an ingoing IT impact assessment, and we think the quantitative assessment should come after that, because the IT impact assessment and also a feasibility assessment in terms of the options that we have on the table as of now, which, as Martin also presented, some of the options came up pretty late in the process in the dialogue between TSOs and Acer, and we also think they're quite good options, but they need to be feasible also within the time frame that we have. So that's we will, as Martin also said, come back to and ask for feedback later or after the submission actually to Acer. Now, if we should just take questions, Martin, one by one. There are some questions in terms of the HAR submission and the collaterals.
Yes,
leave the floor to
on
Tomac.
that point, Jim, yeah. So I see that we have roughly 50 minutes left if we want to keep a minute or two for the wrap up. And we still have those general concerns on long-term flow-based from the market participants. I would propose to give 5 minutes to those points and then keep 10 minutes for the hard, more detailed discussions, and let's focus on questions that did not receive any reply yet in Slido. So maybe on the general concerns, the easiest would be that Hélène or Lorenzo, you take the floor to express them. You could also express general views on the HAR, taking that opportunity.
Yeah, thank you. Lorenzo, is it okay if I start? I think we are quite aligned between IFET and Eurelectric on this, so I will start and Lorenzo can complete. So maybe as a general concerns on the allocation principle, so to use a flow-based methodology. For us, flow-based is a mathematical methodology to address interdependencies of physical flows. It's very far from to be perceived as a good methodology for FTR, and I think we really challenged the concept of introducing competition between the borders for FTR. So of course, competition within one border is obvious, but we really do not understand the motivation to bring competition between the borders, what it would bring to the overall welfare. For us, FCA is quite clear that hedging opportunities should be given to all market participants, and introducing a flow factor competition in the allocation of FTR is then generating a lack of hedging possibility for those market participants located where the spread is low, so at borders where the spread is low. This is, by the way, highlighted in Acer report on forward on page 9. So we really fail to understand the motivation there. And as pointed by Lorenzo, for us, the benefit have not been demonstrated. So only some slides have been presented to us in the MESC of 2021 with some tables, but clearly not a detailed analysis showing the impact border per border. So I think we agree to disagree, and we just wanted to make it once more to make it clear that we are opposed to this idea, and that for us the least would be now to have a detailed impact assessment border per border to at least show us what will happen to us for market participants, so to make sure that market participants in those borders where the spread are low and where zero volumes or very low volume will be allocated are prepared for this negative change. So that's a first request. We also suggested that a close monitoring of that impact should be made at the go live, and we haven't seen any confirmation about that close monitoring. So that's maybe the second point. And on the more particular on the EUR, I think it's quite concerning to see that the EUR will be submitted by TSOs without a solution found for the collateral issue. We understand that solutions are being studied, and we understand it can take time, and it's important to take time to find the right solution. But we think it's not very prudent to issue it without the solution, and having something in the accompanying document, the explanatory note, is not legally sound and legally strong. So we also think it's not an appropriate, let's say, governance or an appropriate way to proceed, and we would rather recommend to postpone the submission of EUR, making time for JAO, TSOs, and Acer to find an appropriate solution. We think it's not a good idea to rush doing something that is not ready and for which we haven't found the appropriate solution. And last point that has not been tackled, I think, today, and for which we also raise concern for a very long time now, is on the objective function. So by maximizing the surplus, so by introducing this flow very low or zero volume at some borders. We asked several times to find mitigation measures for that. We came with proposals that have not been retained, but no other proposal have been put on the table. Like, for instance, a minimum volume could be guaranteed, like making sure that you do not end up in a corner of the domain with zero volume on some border. So we imagine that some alternatives are possible to mitigate that risk, and we were wondering if those alternatives were studied at least, or if what would be the way forward on that to avoid that very adverse situation. I was a bit long, sorry, but those are the points on which we remain extremely concerned, to be clear.
Thank you very much, Hélène. I would propose to divide your points into two, giving points 1 and 3 to Zoran. First, the general point on long-term flow-based, and the point on the single allocation platform. And maybe on the second point related to the HAR planning, I will give the floor to Martin after.
Yeah, thank you. So Hélène, yes, these are the points that we have been discussing for a long time. We believe also from Acer sides that we have proven the requirement from FCA Article 10.5 that the flow-based can be applied in the region where it increases economic efficiency with the same level of system security. We provided parallel analysis of NTC-based allocation and flow-based allocation and suite simulations at that point of time, applying the same level of system security as for the NTC allocation, converting minimum RAMs from NTC world to the flow-based world, and there was a 27% higher economic surplus. I know that this is not sufficient for you. This was the task, this was the legal task for us. We also explained in our decision that it's a normal effect that now with the flow-based approach, there is a bidding and competition among borders, and the bids from one border can outbid the bids from another border. One caveat regarding our results is that we have been using bids from the auctions from year 2020, and we made only one scenario at that time with bids with changed pattern. With original bids, there were some cases of borders with zero capacities allocated, and I would say this is a normal effect in a flow-based world. When we levelized all bids to the same level, keeping the price curve, there were better distribution of the allocated quantities. First of all, we have to get used to such an effect. Second of all, we expect from TSOs to come out with new simulations, also simulating the behavior of market participants, which would adjust to the new situation and possibly then provide, let's say, a different pattern of allocated volumes. Why flow based on the long term? We understand this issue. There are many things with which Acer is not happy. One of those is size of the bidding zones, and indeed it provides a sort of deviation in the market, and the different sizes of bidding zones, one can outbid another due to the size and the effects on the PTDF factors. We are fighting against it on a different field. On the other hand, we have to provide consistency between the flow-based and between the long-term allocation and day ahead allocation, making it both flow-based. There is a competition between bids. Also in the NTC world, just is not being seen, and redispatching costs suffer because of it, because of many excessive flows on lateral borders that has to be decongested. So the flow-based long-term, also of the having in mind that this is FTR, keeps the same shape or similar shape of the domain as on the day ahead, and hopefully does not provide over allocation on some border. That's why we have to follow this. And what I would also say, we should all be aware that this effect is normal, expected, and we have to get used to this. The effect of bids competing across different borders. Where we are not happy on Acer size is the size of minimum RAM and size of capacity in total. That's where we agree with the market participants. So the point to press, I would say, for market participants would be the size of minimum RAM. We left the space, and we clearly explained this in our decision from November 2021, that we would expect higher capacities to be allocated on the long term, of course, having in mind the security constraints. So this is the place. Increase of minimum RAM on yearly and monthly auctions should be the place for adjustment. And then regarding the algorithm to be applied, indeed throughout the whole previous year we discussed the current allocation algorithm, which is based on a market spread, and there were some ideas about the risk premium to be included, but sincerely we haven't heard of any concrete proposal. We had open discussion and there were no concrete proposals, only the ideas, because the only thing that we agreed that it's very hard to be calculated. That's why there's a decision of both Acer and TSO, supported by NRAs, I would say, to go on with the mathematical approach as provided now in the SAP. We stay open for adjustment of this algorithm as soon as there will be a viable approach and a viable proposal from any side.
Thank you very much, Zoran. Jim, do you want to react on top of what Zoran shared, or shall we give the floor to Martin? Yes.
I'll make a comment. I mean, we on the TSO side, Helen, we also did sensitivity analysis, and we are still performing sensitivity analysis on the flow-based allocation results with various parts of min-RAM increase and bid allocation, and on those results, we expect to have a workshop presenting those within a few weeks. But we, to be frank, honest, we do see quite the same result in all our sensitivity analysis. So just a comment on the min-RAM comment by Zoran. But yeah, we'll revert back with that as soon as we are done and have robust results.
Thank you, Jim. Second point of Hélène, which was related to the hard planning. On this point, Martin, do you want to react?
Yes, thanks, Thomas, and thanks, Hélène, for raising this. I think, yeah, regarding the planning, the considerations of collateral in this process, I think I can fully agree with you that it's really not ideal to have it very at this very late stage, and not having this consulted with you before. I think we have to look into this and how we can consider this in the further process regarding the hard decision, and especially this part of it. Yeah, we will have to look into it, how we should ideally do this. I think for us it's very clear that this is a very important topic for market participants, and we should have thorough consultation on this. I think this is very important for us as well. I think to really take in your concerns and views into account here. I mean, maybe you can also already provide some first reaction to these ideas which were shared so far after the call at some point, if you manage. And yeah, regarding the process, I think we will have to see how we can ideally address this further on. I think also considering that we would need some time for implementing, etc. So yeah, I think it's something to take away from us and see how ideally we can integrate it or address it in the ongoing, like in the upcoming process, or somehow else at least.
Very quickly, do you have more material, more explanation? Because to be honest, it was quite quick, and the solution with the cap was not very clear to me. So if you can share more details or maybe example so that we can understand it and provide you with your feedback, our feedback, it will be great.
Yeah, I can describe it a little bit further. I mean, in the end, it is the high level concept is on the slide, and we don't have it assessed in any kind of last details. But I mean, I can also still provide you with further explanation, maybe on how this solution should look like, or how it should function in the end. So yeah, I think the general principle is here, maybe, or also maybe from your side, if you have a look and you have some specific remaining questions on what kind of aspects are not clear to you, maybe it's also easier if you just come like approaches with your question and where you would need more clarification, and then we can also enter into a discussion on this as well, how it should be designed, etc. So it's rather, as said, quite a recent option or discussed option, and we ourselves still are in the process of further assessing it as well. But yeah, just please have a look at it. If there is some general aspects which are not clear, please just let us know as well.
Good. Thank you, Martin. Looking at the time, we're already 1 minute past, but I think we have conclusions and next steps on 2 streams at least. And I will give the floor to Zoran to wrap up the meeting. Looking at the questions, I see that most of them are no comments. I tried to archive the one that received an answer that I deem satisfying. So I think that most of them are answered, but we would be happy to answer questions afterwards if there are still some that are open. Zoran, you have the floor to wrap up.
Yes, thank you. So we saw a few points where we naturally and disagree for a long time, but at least we have an open discussion regarding that. So also whatever we discussed today obviously needs a follow-up, and I would just provide 2 points in the wrap-up. The one is that we will organize another workshop for the harmonized allocation rules, including in particular collateral issues, within the ACER's proceeding of the hard decision. So that will be soon. It can be we expect this proceedings to start in the beginning of March. Another workshop we would organize, hopefully ENTSO-E and Acer together on the long-term flow-based allocation, having more detailed TSOs simulation results. That would be 2 points from my side, at least. Maybe you can complement me or my colleagues or TSOs if there is something more to add, or some further, let's say, proposals from market participants.
Okay. Thank you, Zoran. I think that was a good closing word, and then we stay in touch for the next steps on this hot topic. Thank you very much, all, and have a very nice end of day then.
Thanks all. Bye.
Bye. Thanks all.
Goodbye.